Welcome to today's webinar on the HP LiveVault cloud-based server backup and recovery solution. What I would like to do during today's webinar is first introduce the technology to you through a couple of presentation material slides, and then a little bit later we can do a demonstration of what it looks like in real usage. So LiveVault is a true cloud-based service. It's been in operation now for well over 10 years. We have over 9 petabytes of back-end stored data on behalf of our customers who are using the service. And as you'll see in a minute, we are always using mirrored vaulting sites, and we have them all around the world. LiveVault is actually doing over 2 million backup jobs every single day. There are, of course, other online backup services around now. LiveVault was one of the very, very first ones. But one of the things that sets LiveVault apart is that we are able to do very low-impact cloud-based backups. I'll mention some of the technical reasons for that in a little bit. With LiveVault, there is an agent that gets installed on each server that you want to back up. And we have agents for all the different flavors of Windows servers. So Windows 2003 all the way up to Windows 2012 R2 and all the versions in between. We also have Linux agents available. So if you have Linux and Windows mixed environments, you can use the same backup service for both of them. In the industry, in the press, there are a couple of acronyms that are commonly used when talking about backup, and I'll introduce them here for you quickly if you're not familiar with them. The first is what we call the RTOs. That stands for the Recovery Time Objectives. So the RTO says, how long does it take you to do a restore? And one of the very first things that occurs to people when they're looking at an online backup service is, oh my gosh, my bandwidth is going to be restrictive here. It's going to limit the rate at which I can restore data, isn't it? What are you going to do about that? Well, LiveVault has a number of different techniques and capabilities to address that. The first is we have a unique optimization that we call Delta Restore that speeds up recoveries over the internet. We also offer an optional Turbo Restore appliance device. So this allows you to have on-site as well as off-site backups. And finally, we have media restore options available so that if you want to have large amounts of data shipped back, perhaps to different locations, we can do that. The other acronym that's very commonly used is called the RPOs, which stands for the Recovery Point Objectives. So the RPO says, well, after you have done a restore, now how current is the data that you have to work with? What's the amount of data loss that you suffered? Well, LiveVault gives you the best possible recovery points of any online service out there today because we can and do back up busy active servers every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, giving you a multiplicity of recovery points that you can choose from. And so if you do have a server outage, for example, in the middle of the afternoon, you do not have to go to last night's backup. We can have backups within 15 or 30 minutes of the outage. And as I said, because the backups are so low impact, customers routinely do back up their servers every 15 minutes, and nobody notices any performance degradation. This is just one slide to introduce how the service works. On the upper left there, you can see that any given customer might have multiple sites, and each site might have multiple servers. Certainly a partner would have multiple customers, and each of them could have many sites and servers. As I said, there is this LiveVault agent that gets installed on each server. It's not very big. It's sort of a 30 or 40 megabyte package. And it literally only takes 3 or 4 minutes to do the installation. When it is installed, it is a system service. It will automatically start up each time the server is booted. And the first thing it does is make an outbound TCP connection to our back end. That's really a command and control connection. It's over that the agent learns what the backup policies are, what backup schedules it's supposed to follow, and what vault it's supposed to talk to. And it then makes a second outbound TCP connection to the designated vault. And it is over that connection that the actual backup and restore traffic is going to flow. And as you can see here on the right-hand side, we have mirrored data centers. So the agent is going to be sending the data to one or the other of our data centers, and then over our bandwidth, we are mirroring or replicating everything to a second geographically separated location. And high availability has been built right into the LiveVault software itself. And the way that works is if we ever had troubles with one of our vaults or had to take it down for maintenance or something, the agents that are talking to that particular vault are automatically given new instructions over that command and control connection to start talking to the alternate vault instead. Now that's invisible to partners, it's invisible to customers. It does not impact the ability to continue with backups or to do restores. As I said, it is the way that we have high availability as a core part of the LiveVault service. In the U.S., our vaulting sites are in western Pennsylvania and outside of Kansas City, Missouri. They're both in the middle of the country, away from earthquakes and so forth. They are, as far as I know, literally the most physically secure facilities in the country available to non-military organizations. They are underground, and they are hundreds of feet underground, actually. We also have vaulting sites in Montreal and Toronto, Canada, for our Canadian customers, in the UK and in Belgium for our European customers, and also in Australia for our Asia-Pacific customers. LiveVault is a true cloud-based service. There's no back-end monitoring or capacity planning or bandwidth purchasing that's needed in order to operate the back-end. We do all of that on behalf of our customers, and we have a service operations group that takes care of that. We also offer our customers customer service 24/7/365. It says here for emergencies, and indeed we do ask, if possible, to please call us during our regular business hours for routine stuff, but there's never any financial cost associated with service, so you can call us at any time, day or night, with matters serious or trivial, and we can provide you with assistance when you need it. The interface for LiveVault is entirely a web-based interface. You'll see that in a minute. It's very nice for customers and partners. It means that you don't need a VPN connection into any particular network. You don't need any LiveVault software at all on your laptop or desktop device. In fact, LiveVault administrators these days do many of their duties right off their smartphones or tablet-type devices. As I mentioned, there is this small agent that gets deployed on each server, and it just takes a couple of minutes to do that. It is during the install that a couple of the unique security features associated with LiveVault appear. Security is a major topic with this service. I could spend quite a bit of time just talking about that. But a couple of the unique things that we do occur at the time you do the install. First, I should mention that the agent is going to encrypt all the data using the advanced encryption standard with a 256-bit length key before any data goes anywhere, before it leaves the server. And the data is going to stay encrypted in transmission and also stay encrypted in our back-end storage vaults. And when you do the install of the LiveVault agent on a server, and probably the most interesting question that you're asked is to specify a data encryption password for that server, and you type in some text string there. You don't want to lose that. If down the road you need to do a full system disaster recovery, or if you want to do a redirected restore, take data from server A and restore it onto server B, you have to be able to provide server B with server A's data encryption password. Well, we allow you to have an encrypted copy of the password that you just entered stored at HP. This is an optional service. If you elect to use it, it doesn't cost anything. And for most customers, I think it's a very good choice. It means that if 2 years down the road you suddenly do need that data encryption password and nobody can find it or remember it, we are in a position to be able to give it back to you after proper authentication. On the other hand, we do have many customers actually in financial services and healthcare who want a 100% technical guarantee that no third party, not HP or Autonomy or anybody else, could ever see their backup data. Well, all they need to do is to keep that data encryption password safe in whatever manner is appropriate to them and decline this escrow option. The other option that's mentioned on this slide here is that we allow you to change the data encryption password whenever you might need to. I mean, this is particularly interesting for customers that are retaining backups for long periods of time, say a year or 7 years. And during those times, maybe some key person might leave your organization, or just like changing the locks on the door, you'd like to change the data encryption passwords. You can do that with LiveVault. And when you do it, only the new password is valid going forward, but it doesn't restrict your ability to recover data from the older backups. As I said, there's a great deal more to security than I've just mentioned, and in fact it would take any given customer a very extensive amount of time and effort to go through a complete security review. So we have third-party security audits. They're renewed every year. Two of the important ones are PCI DSS, which was the standard developed by the major credit card companies. And also, we are ISO 27001 certified. This is really the international standard for security management systems. There's about 11 separate areas of investigation that go into obtaining this certification. It is for customers that have government, security, regulatory compliance needs. It is one-stop shopping. With this certification, customers can satisfy any security requirements of FISMA or GLBA or any of the other government requirements. We are also HIPAA compliant. We have many customers with healthcare data under backup and recovery operations with us, and we also participate in Safe Harbor, which is the agreement between the U.S. and the European Union about handling personal data. From a communication standpoint, as I've already mentioned, the agent makes all of the connections outbound, so there's never any reason to have to sort of punch any holes in a customer's firewall. And as I've already mentioned, high availability has been built right into the agent software itself. There is one important option with LiveVault that we call the Turbo Restore Appliance, or TRA. It's shown here as a box on the upper left-hand side, and that's literally what it is. It is a full system unit. It is running a version of Windows, and it is running the LiveVault Turbo Restore Appliance software. And with this option, the servers at that location can back up first locally onto the Turbo Restore Appliance, and then the TRA will send all the data off-site through the public network to our back-end vaulting sites. The appliance gives customers essentially the, quote, best of both worlds, unquote. They have on-site local backup copies, and they still have off-site cloud-based copies as protection against the worst-case disaster scenarios in which you'd have to assume that perhaps the whole facility had been lost, including the Turbo Restore appliances. Now, the appliance is completely optional. You don't have to have it, but it is a fairly popular option, particularly for sites that have relatively large amounts of data and perhaps relatively limited amounts of bandwidth. We offer them in 4 pre-configured sizes. So we have 4, 8, 12, and 24 terabyte sizes as what we can provide, where the software is preloaded on the HP server hardware units that we ship. So customers literally just plug it in and do a very minimal install so that we can find the IP address assigned to the unit, and after that it's ready for use. If you do use one of our pre-configured units, you're paying a monthly rental fee or a lease fee basically, and it includes a service contract. If there's ever any problems with the hardware, HP will take care of that and replace it or repair it as necessary. We will also make the Turbo Restore Appliance software available to a customer as licensed software, so that they can install it really on any Windows server of their choosing. That's what we call the custom Turbo Restore Appliance option. From a backup standpoint, the very first backup that LiveVault does is a full backup. We call it the initial synchronization. And during that, every block of every file and database that you've asked us to protect is going to get compressed, encrypted, and then transmitted to the off-site vaulting sites. But we only do that once. All of the backups that we do after that are what we call file system block level deltas. So LiveVault is very careful to never send the same file system block a second time. There are other online backup services out there that do similar types of things. They do incremental backups or block level backups, but we are uniquely efficient about the way we do it. There's really 2 parts to the process. The first is to figure out, well, what did actually change since the prior backup, and then the second part is to transmit just that limited set of file system blocks. Well, that first part doesn't require a lot of bandwidth, but it certainly can be very computationally expensive on the server. If you had to check the file modify dates on 1 million different files in a large shared file server, or if you had to do block checksum comparisons on all the blocks of a large open database files, very, very computationally expensive. And LiveVault doesn't do those type of things. Instead, we actually have a small piece of kernel code that gets installed right into the file system. And what it does is keep track of the write activity that the file system is doing. So, for example, if file 59 of block A gets written, that gets noted down. So when our LiveVault agent wakes up, say at 10:15 to do the next backup, it knows immediately exactly which blocks it needs to compress, encrypt, and then transmit. It does that, and then it goes back to sleep. And what this means in reality is that over 90% of our customers do use what we call our continuous, but it's really an every 15-minute backup schedule. We call it continuous because we are continuously tracking file system activity, but the backups are actually done on discrete 15-minute intervals. And there's 2 major benefits that customers get from this. The first, I think, pretty obviously, is that if you do have a major server outage and then you need to recover the complete system, or if you have just any sort of data outage, we have very current data from which you can restore, usually within 15 or 30 minutes of the outage. But we also keep all these 15-minute recovery points for at least 24 hours, at least a full day, so that if you had a corruption event, and it turns out that corruptions are very common. They can be caused by program software bugs or viruses, but most of them, in fact, are human mistakes of one kind or another. So somebody deletes 1,000 records out of a big file and goes, oops. Well, with LiveVault, you can unwind the clock in 15-minute increments of time back to just a moment or two prior to when that corruption event might have occurred. From a restore standpoint, restoring over limited bandwidth connections presents some challenges, and LiveVault has done the best job possible to try to make the restore processes and restore options as rich and as high performance as is available. The first is that we do offer a unique restore optimization that we call Delta Restore. We are as in fact smart on the restore side as we are on the backup side. So for those very common cases where you're recovering from some type of corruption event, say you have a database and it's gotten corrupted and it's 300 gigabytes in size, you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to restore 300 gigabytes. Isn't that going to take me a very long time? Well, no, because LiveVault is smart enough to actually use the corrupted files as a starting point so that we will determine the differences between what you have on the disk and the recovery point that you've selected to restore to, and then only transmit back the differences between the corrupted file and the recovery point that you want to use, so that that 300 gigabyte restore can in fact occur in just a couple of minutes of time. But of course, if you have a server outage and you have a new or repaired or replaced server and it's got empty disks on it, Delta Restore isn't going to apply. You do have to send all the data at that point. And certainly that's where having a Turbo Restore appliance can make a big difference, because with the TRA, the restore can be done completely off the local device. You don't need any bandwidth at all. And in this regard, I should mention that LiveVault supports redirected restores. So if you do have a server outage, maybe you have some other server that you can press into service, at least temporarily. Maybe you don't have a replacement immediately available to you. Well, with LiveVault, you can redirect data that had backed up from one server onto a different server. And LiveVault, finally, I want to mention, is fully capable of doing complete system disaster recoveries. It is capable of backing up the entire operating system, the registry, the system state, and in fact restoring that onto newer or different hardware than the hardware that might have failed. So if a customer has a server that's 3 or 4 years old and it finally conks out, I mean, you can't and don't want to replace it exactly. You want to get something newer and better and different. And with LiveVault, you can do that. From a billing standpoint, LiveVault is charged based on the amount of protected data. This is quite different than most of our competition. Most of our competition will bill you based on the amount of data that they have stored on your behalf in their vaults. And customers can't see that. They can't measure it directly, and they have no way of predicting how much it will be, because it depends on things like compressibility ratios and how efficient the vendor is with storing it and what the change rates are. And so that creates a very variable billing situation for those customers. They can't live or can't know that they'll be able to live within a fixed budget for backup. With LiveVault, we're not doing that. We're looking at the original file sizes as the customers see them on their servers. So if you go to a Windows directory and go to Properties and Windows says it's a 50 gigabyte directory and you back it up with LiveVault, you're going to be billed based on 50 gigabytes. If it's still 50 gigabytes at the end of the month, it doesn't matter what type of data it was, or what the change rates were, or how much bandwidth it used, or how compressible the data was, or how efficient we are with deduping it. All that matters is the fact that it's a 50 gigabyte amount. So a salesperson, for example, can give a customer a 100% completely accurate price quote simply by adding up the number of gigabytes that the customer needs to protect and then multiplying by the appropriate per gigabyte rates. We actually have 3 per gigabyte rates. They're based on the retentions that you select. The highest rate is for data that we are keeping for 7 years. We have a lower rate for data where we're keeping backups for 1 year. And we also have 30-day and 90-day retentions, and there's a single rate for that, so it's the same per gigabyte cost for 30-day or 90-day retention. That's our standard least expensive rate. As I mentioned, there's no charge for setup fees, there's no charge for agent fees, there's no customer support fees, and there's no charge for restores. So customers can restore as much data as they need to from the internet or off of one of the Turbo Restore appliances. There's no cost for that either. There is one other way of restoring data that we call our media restore option. There is a service fee associated with this. It's not used very often, but it's a very important part of the insurance guarantee that you're getting with the LiveVault service. That is to say, if you did have a major catastrophe, say the whole computer room was flooded, and you suddenly needed to get a lot of data back, potentially from many different servers, this can be the fastest way to do that. We keep these media restore devices at our data centers, and when you make a restore request, you can say, put the data on a media restore device, give us a shipping address, and as soon as the data is loaded up, we will overnight ship it wherever you tell us to, maybe to a DR site or to a different location. The fee for this is a fixed handling fee. It doesn't depend on the amount of data or the number of servers involved. We also, in this same vein, have a data shuttle service for sending data in the other direction. I mentioned that the very first backup that we do is an initial synchronization. Well, if you don't have very much bandwidth, that can take many days or even weeks in some cases. And if customers want to avoid that sort of heavy bandwidth usage, we can send them a device which they put onto the local area network. The initial backup is done onto that, and then they put it back in the box and return it to us, and then we offload it at our data center. So this is a way of accomplishing that one-time initial backup without tying up the bandwidth. Again, there's a handling fee for this, and once again, not dependent on the amount of data or the number of servers involved. I'm about to do a little demo. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop with you. You should now see a screen that says, welcome, log into the LiveVault service. This is an Internet Explorer window that I have up on my laptop. I don't have any LiveVault software here at all. I'm going to go ahead and log into a little partner demo site that I have set up here. I'm going to log in as a partner administrator. This is the LiveVault homepage. At the very top, this little red record, Acme Incorporated, that's the name for my demonstration partner. Now, this particular partner has 5 different customer accounts, Bright Widgets, the HPES, the SE Test Area Small Boats Company, and a VMware demo customer. You can also see that there's a lab administrator role. Now, this role record is located directly underneath the partner. It's what we would call a partner level role record. And all user accounts, all administrator accounts in LiveVault are located under a role. And the role defines both the scope of visibility, what they can see and not see, and what rights and privileges they have or don't have. But in this particular case, there are 4 of us who have partner level admin rights to this particular partner account. If I go to one of the customers like Bright Widgets, you can see there's a customer administrator role here. So users under this role, when they log in, can't see anything that's not associated with this customer. And there is a very long list of rights and privileges that can be specifically granted or denied when you set up a role. So should users under the role be able to add new users, should be able to play with Turbo Restore appliances, should be able to add new servers to protection or edit backup policies or do restores or order media restores, etc., etc. And in fact, someone here has created a restore-only role. I mean, this might be appropriate for people on the help desk to help users restore files but not allow them to change backup policies. This particular customer is using groups. I have an application servers group and a file servers group. You don't have to use groups, but if you have dozens or hundreds of servers, it's often very handy to be able to organize them either by their location or by their purpose, whatever makes sense to you. And I also have one of these Turbo Restore appliances. If I open up one of my groups, like the application servers group, I'm actually backing up an Exchange server, and I'm backing up a SQL server. These are, in fact, the 2 most popular applications that are protected with LiveVault. And the LiveVault agent is Exchange aware, and it's also SQL aware. What that means is that when the agent is installed on a server, it will automatically detect the presence of SQL and Exchange and give the user the opportunity with just 1 or 2 check marks to have those database applications properly protected. The LiveVault agent will interact with SQL or Exchange before each backup starts, It will interact with them after each backup completes, for example, to cause them to truncate log files, and also during restores. So, for example, you can restore a SQL database into a running SQL instance without having to stop SQL or do anything else. It will, in fact, you can restore it under a different name if you would like to. So these aware options mean that you're assured that these SQL and Exchange databases are being captured in a transactionally consistent state, and that you have very flexible database-oriented recovery options associated with them. If I click on one of the servers, like the SQL server here, I'll get a summary display about that particular machine on the right-hand side. You can see that it is connected to the appliance, and the appliance is talking to a vault in this case. And we are using this continuous, or what we call every 15-minute backup schedule. I happen to be on East Coast time right now. It is now 12:29 by my laptop. The last backup done was done at 12:16, so about 14 minutes ago. So if this whole server conked out right now, I could restore everything on it the way it was just 14 minutes ago. If I sit here and chat for another minute, we will probably see the 12:30 or 12:31 backup kick off. There are in fact a couple of different backup policies running on this server. One of them is called C drive. As you can see here, it's backing up 2.8 gigabytes more or less. We are also backing up the system state, so we are able to do a full system restore if that were needed. And because it is a SQL server, I'm also backing up the SQL database with a SQL aware backup option that you can see displayed here at the bottom of the screen. Now, before I go any further, I should probably reflect that there are sort of fundamentally three things that you do with this user interface. The first is when you add a new server to protection, this is where you would come to set its backup policies, schedules, and retentions. But those tend to be things that get set once and don't change very much. They're very static settings after that. The second reason to use the interface is if you want to check on the status of things. We do have a full set of backup logs, restore logs, network usage charts. We have a security audit log, so if there's ever any questions about who did such and such a restore or who set the backup policy this way, all of that information is logged. But very frankly, customers don't log in every day to check status. There's no need to do that. LiveVault has moved very heavily in the direction of exception-based processing. So we have alerts and monitoring built into our agents, our appliances, our vaults. So if things aren't going the way they should, the LiveVault software will proactively send out emailed alerts or warnings as necessary to whoever the designated technical contacts are. This is very much a set it and forget it service. It runs automatically unattended in the background, and if things aren't going the way they should, the software will tell you. And you can see why we moved so heavily in that direction. Most of our customers are backing up every server 96 times a day. There's no way we could expect you to look at 96 backup logs every day. So it's kind of a historical thing. People don't do that. They're there if you want to look at something because there is some kind of problem. The third reason to use the interface is when you want to restore things. So when I do little demos for the first time, I normally skip over the backup tab, go right to the restore tab here. It's very representative of how the LiveVault interface works overall. And if you would like to see any other part of the interface later, please ask. I'd be more than happy to show it to you. There haven't been any recent restores. If there had been, they would be displayed here, but I'm going to go ahead and click the New Restore button. And my first screen here allows me to tell LiveVault how I would like to have the data delivered. The first left-hand default choice there is to do it over the internet, and this includes the Turbo Restore appliance. If there is a TRA, the agent is smart enough to pull the data from there instead. I don't have to separately keep track of what backups are on the TRA and which ones are on the vaults. And then the right-hand choice is to have one of those media restore devices shipped to you. I'm certainly just going to do a small restore today, so I'll take the default. Because this is a SQL server, I'm now asked, do I want to just restore ordinary files and directories? That's what we would call a standard policy restore. Or do I want to restore one or more SQL databases? For an initial demo here, we'll just restore a couple of files, so I'll take the next button. And this will bring up the restore screen, which you should see now. The first thing you do with any restore is give it some kind of a name. It doesn't matter what. All on Tuesday is okay. And the next line down is the version line. Oh, and while I was talking, the 12:31 backup did occur because by default we'll show you the most recent restorable version that we have, and that's now as of 12:31 today, just literally 2 minutes ago. But with this little drop down I can get a calendar, And any of the days shown in green here are days for which LiveVault has at least one backup version, one recovery point. If I go to today's date, the 29th, you can see that starting at midnight and literally every 15 minutes, 4 times an hour, right up until just a couple of minutes ago, there's different choice points available to me. So if somebody had worked on some very large file, saved it, and come back from lunch and said, oh, yikes, what a mess, can you get that back to me the way it was, more or less an hour ago, say at 11:30, I could simply choose that as my desired recovery time. Now, we don't keep all of these 15-minute backup versions forever. We do keep them all for at least 24 hours, but after that, we'll reduce them down so that we only have 4 per day. And the 4 that we choose will be nicely spaced out in time. So if I go back to like the 27th, you can see I have a morning, I have a late morning or noonish type backup, an afternoon, and then late evening backup. Now, in this particular case, for reasons I can't define, we still have 5 versions available instead of 4, but eventually it will be reduced down to 4 versions of being available to me. If I look back in time more than a week ago, I'm only going to have 1 backup version available to me per day. It will be the very last one we made on that day, as shown here. 11:47 p.m. is very, very typical. And we'll keep those daily backups for a rolling 30-day period. What I've tried to illustrate here is our standard default 30-day retention plan, where we keep every backup for 24 hours, 4 backups per day within the most recent week, and then daily backups for a month. So if I go back here, we can see I still have backups into June. And if you use our 3-month retention or 90-day retention, then we'll keep the calendar month-end backups, the last backup of each month, for at least 3 months. If you use our 1-year retention, then we do all of the stuff that I showed you for the 30-day program, plus we'll keep the calendar month-end backups for a full year. And if you use our 7-year retention, we do all of the 1-year retention, keep all of the daily backups, keep all of the month-end backups for a year, and then we keep the calendar quarter ends 6 more years. So we'll keep the last backups from March, from June, September, and December for 6 more years, giving you a total of 7 years in which you have recovery points available to you. Anyway, we've chosen 11:30 as a restore point today. Now, if the whole server had blown up and I really was in need of doing a full system disaster recovery, I could simply click on the server name here, and then all the backed up partitions would be shown on the right-hand side. This is a very simple server. I only have a C drive, so I would check that off. And I would also check off the Restore System State box that you see on the lower left. With LiveVault, the way full system disaster recoveries are done is at the file system level. So what that means is you order a replacement server with the same base level OS and service pack as was on the failed machine, or set up or repair a machine with the same operating system and service pack. But when you do that, we really insist that it just be the minimum operating system install, just a workgroup install, no IIS, nothing fancy, just enough to be able to have the machine on the network with the LiveVault agent loaded there. And then, with the machine booted in one of the safe modes, it's called Directory Services Recovery Mode, DSRM, you would then do exactly the restore that I have ticked off here. And when it finishes, you will get an email notice telling you that it has finished. You don't have to hang around and watch it. And then you boot the server back into normal mode. And a registry merge occurs so that the older restored device drivers are not allowed to wipe out the new drivers for the new hardware, but everything else comes back exactly the way the original was. So you once again have the same administrator accounts, admin passwords, hotfixes, and application registry settings. But as I said, the hardware can be different. It can be running on the different set of drivers. A very nice capability associated with the service, but I'm certainly not going to do that today. So instead, I can click the little plus sign here and browse around and choose some material for recovery. I have a little demo data directory with a couple of files in it, so I've already checked off, but I can check those off. And then there's some options that can help govern the behavior. The top set of options here allows me to tell LiveVault how to handle duplicates. The default is to overwrite the existing file, even if the restored file is older. It's the third choice here. But I could say I want to rename the existing or the restored files, or I only want to overwrite if the restored file is newer, or I don't want LiveVault to do anything when overwrite might be required. In the middle here, you can do redirected restores. As I mentioned, you can redirect to a different computer or redirect to a different location, or both. So if I wanted to put these restored files in a temp directory off on the side, I can do that. You normally want to keep the original security attributes. You can generate a detailed log file, and I might want to start the restore later tonight, perhaps after people had gone home. But when I click the next button, it should give me a synopsis screen showing me what I'm about to do. Here's a list of the particular files that I've chosen, or directories that I've chosen to recover. If I click the button, the restore job will start. Restores start pretty promptly. They're all disk-based, so whether I'm restoring data from an hour ago or a year ago doesn't make much difference. How long the restore is going to take is obviously going to depend on how much data is involved, whether or not there's one of those turbo restore appliances, how effective the delta restore optimization was, and if there's no appliance, how good the bandwidth connection was. But in this particular case, it says that it took all of 2 seconds to restore 69 megabytes. In this case, it pulled it from the turbo restore appliance. Now, it says that it restored 69 megabytes. It didn't actually transmit that amount of data because it would only have transmitted the differences in these files between 1:30 a.m. this morning and current state of those files as they are at the moment. There are a couple of other topics that I want to be sure that I have time to mention. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And the first topic I'd like to bring up is the discussion of virtual machines. Virtual machines have become very important in many, many different organizations these days, and LiveVault is very capable of backing up virtual machine environments. There's a couple of ways to do that. The first is you can install the LiveVault agent directly within the guest operating systems themselves. And there are times when you almost certainly want to do this. For example, if you are running a SQL application in a virtual machine, you almost certainly want to take advantage of the SQL-aware capabilities of the LiveVault agent, which you would do by having the agent running in the guest system itself. You also have the choice of what to back up, what to exclude, what retentions to use, all the flexibilities that you have in a physical server when you install the agent directly in the guest. And by the way, it doesn't cost anything to do that. It doesn't cost anything monetarily. As I said, there's no agent fees and no support fees or setup fees. And it doesn't cost anything from performance reasons. The agent, as I've already mentioned, is extremely efficient. And we provide a server template capability to make this easy for you to do. If you have dozens of virtual machines and you'd like them all backed up in exactly the same way, you can create one or more server templates and then assign the virtual machines to an appropriate template. And that way you have a consistent backup strategy for all the machines that are assigned to a template. If you then edit the template, all of the machines assigned to it will adjust their backup behaviors according to the revised template specifications that you have. We are also able to support VMware image level backups. To introduce that topic for you, the VMware system provides an API called the VADP API. This is what they call also their vStorage API, which allows backup vendors such as LiveVault to be able to interact with VMware, vCenter in particular, to cause VMware to take image-based snapshots of running virtual machines, which then can be accessed for backup purposes. And the way we do that is we have a special version of the LiveVault agent that we call the Virtual Machine Collector. It can run on a physical server, or it can in fact run as a virtual machine. And what it does is use this VADP API, cause VMware to make virtual machine image snapshots, which it then backs up locally onto a TRA. This is the one time when we require you to have a turbo restore appliance. And that's because with these virtual machine snapshots, the performance of VMware significantly degrades if we hold them for a long period of time. So we really want to be able to capture them quickly, locally, and then the TRA can take as much time as it needs to transmit them off-site in the normal way to the HP vaulting sites. This provides a very efficient and effective way to have complete DR off-site, complete virtual machine image backups, which provide you with the ability to do very simple, straightforward recoveries of an entire virtual machine if you have some sort of series problem. And one of the particular things that we do here is take complete advantage of VMware's changed block tracking, or CBT. This is what makes it efficient enough to do this over wide area bandwidth connections. What CBT does is similar to what the LiveVault agent does. It's VMware's way of tracking just what the differences are between one virtual machine image snapshot and the next virtual machine image snapshot, so that LiveVault only actually has to send the deltas, the differences, similar to the way we do on physical servers. So with this capability, LiveVault now protects virtual and physical environments with the same degree of efficiency. We do, as I said, require a turbo restore appliance in this particular case. We also back up network-attached storage, NAS units. Now, many NAS units, such as NetApp filers, are very proprietary, so it's not possible for us to have a LiveVault agent installed right on the filer itself or on many other NAS units. So this is another example where we have a collector agent, and what it does is use the CIFS protocol to be able to access the contents of the NAS unit for both backup and recovery purposes. So we have a method of capturing these NAS units for off-site cloud-based backup. There is a particular advantage to using Hewlett-Packard's Store Easy NAS units. These are the NAS units delivered by our storage division, because LiveVault and Store Easy have been integrated together. So with a Store Easy NAS unit, you can install the LiveVault agent directly on the host operating system of the NAS unit itself and then back it up just as though it were a physical server, so you don't need the intermediary of a collector agent. An example of HP software and hardware working better together. So to just quickly summarize where we've been today, some of the highlights associated with LiveVault are that it is a proven technology. It's been in service for many, many years now. It does provide completely automatic backup, cloud-based backup, 7x24. No daily monitoring is required because it generates alerts as necessary. It's very low impact backup for very busy and active servers through this unique file system tracking capability that we have built out. It provides very fast restore options through Delta restores, appliances, and media shipment options. It is SQL and Exchange aware. It's used on virtual and physical servers. We have scheduled bandwidth throttling. I haven't shown that to you, but it's a very popular feature with LiveVault, where you can tell the LiveVault agent exactly what hours of the day and the days of the week, how much bandwidth it's allowed to use. So during work hours, for example, you can constrain it to just having a very small impact on the bandwidth usage, and maybe at night times or weekends allow it to use a much greater percentage of the available bandwidth. Customers are backing up, as I said, routinely every 15 minutes. The Turbo Restore appliance is completely optional. Now, in many of our competition, they require you to have an appliance at every single site. With LiveVault, you don't have to. So if you have a lot of remote sites, for example, that are small in character, you probably do not need and would not need to have a Turbo Restore appliance there. But at bigger sites, you probably would use it, but it is an optional device. We have many levels of security. I've only mentioned a few of them today, but we have security built into the software, into the user profiles and interfaces, into the roles and role-based management, physical security at our data centers, and as I've mentioned, the data is always encrypted. And finally, we are always using redundant vaulting sites, so we have great resiliency to any particular hazard on our side of the equation. My last slide is a resources slide. I'll leave it up for a couple of minutes. You probably won't have time to write all this stuff down, but I do at least want to point out my email address. I am, as shown near the bottom here, I am pdale@hp.com. It's just 5 characters, pdale@hp.com. And I really do welcome any kind of comments, follow-up, feedback that you might have. I thank you very much for attending. I hope this was useful for you, and I certainly would like to hear from some of you after the event. So pdale@hp.com, and once again, thank you very much for attending.